Hi, everybody. I cannot think of a more perfect guest for all good things. I am so lucky to be joined today by Tana Amen. I'm also lucky to know her husband, Dr. Daniel Amen. You have seen him likely here on Instagram Live, also on Headline News. I went and first did a segment with him at the Amen Clinic. And we were so impressed and overwhelmed by the wealth of information that he had that we decided to do a week-long series on his clinic, on his brain scans, on his philosophy about brain health. It was just invaluable information. I've developed a friendship with Dr. Amen. I'm honored to know him, but I'm also so grateful to welcome as a powerhouse and success in her own right. She's also an author of a number of books, but her newest book, which is available on pre-order now, is why I would love to have her join here. Tana, it is so great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm so excited. Just honored to be with you.
Well, I am so impressed by you. Your book, which is now available for pre-sale, is called The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, and it's how persistence, grit, and faith created a reluctant healer. Your wording, your choice of words really struck me. First, you are the scared child. Your story is shocking, terrifying, but also a real lesson and hope for all of us. So before we get to the book and how you get to the hope, I just want to hear a little bit about your story, your childhood, why you were so scared and what it took to get you out of it.
You know, it's funny, Lynn, when I met my husband, I think people who go through, I want to just address people watching who have lived this kind of a chaotic, traumatic childhood and have that kind of a background. You start to think that's normal. I thought I was just, garden variety dysfunctional. I thought that, okay, I mean, there's a lot of us that are like that, right? And then you start to minimize it so you can get through it. I thought, well, I wasn't as bad as many people. I wasn't chained to a radiator. I wasn't like, that's how we survive. But when I met Daniel and I started telling him some of the stuff from my past, he's like, are you kidding me? This isn't just garden variety. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Well, then I am kind of, tough, and I'm kind of, I made it through this. And
a survivor.
I'm a survivor. And so over time, he convinced me that I should write this. It took time. It's not one of those things you just want to like spill your guts on your past. You have to be very vulnerable. So, so I decided to do that. I had a mother who was a 16-year-old runaway. She left home very early because her past was way more chaotic than mine. She was determined to make my life better than hers. And she did. So if that gives you any idea, she had a pretty tough time. So she never finished high school, and she worked 3 jobs just to make sure we survived. And so it was pretty crazy. But she also had this idea that she needed to save everybody. So my uncle, who was a heroin addict who lived with us, and there was always strangers living in our house, and it made life a little unpredictable. Let's put it that way. So yeah. And then when I was 4, my other uncle was murdered in a drug deal gone wrong because of the uncle who was a heroin addict. And it was one of those environments where you were always looking around the corner for the next bad thing to happen. And so you're just always, you're always on high alert. And so you start to live that way. I mean, even now I have eyes in the back of my head. There's nowhere that we go that I'm not looking behind me and paying attention, for something to happen.
And, one of the things that I have always heard your husband say that is really powerful is to redirect your anger towards whoever has hurt you in your childhood and really understand the why behind it.
Yeah.
When you talk about your mom, and for anyone who is watching that has experienced any kind of trauma, it doesn't have to be a murder or anything. It can just be a sadness or a fear and not feeling safe in childhood. How you find compassion for whoever caused that for you. How did you do it?
That took time because I mean, my mom was always on my side. I knew that, whatever happened was because she had a heart of gold. She was just not there. She was busy working. But I was molested when I was 12. And then when I was 15, I was walking to school. My stepdad climbed in bed with me when I was 12. I couldn't say the word molested for many, many years. But then when I was 15, I was walking to high school and I was attacked by a total stranger. Big guy in the suit drugged me down an alley. Those are things that took more time to forgive. So, because when I think about someone doing that to my daughter, I think to myself, well, I would rip their beating heart out of their chest. So that took more time for me to forgive. And then it was easier for me to forgive it happening to me. And yet still, when I think about it happening to my daughter, I'm like, yeah, that's a no-go. So that took a lot of time to resolve, but it was worth the work, because when you don't forgive someone, and I know it sounds so cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. If you don't forgive someone, it's like drinking poison and expecting another person to die. It just eats away at you. And so, and one of the people I had to forgive more than anybody was my dad. My dad, who left when I was a baby. He was doing drugs with my uncle, and then became a Baptist minister, but never really lived the life of a minister. So he had taken money from the church, and he was never close to me. But in the end, there's a really great chapter in the end of the book where we reconcile. And all of that anger is just lifted. And what I love is that I realized, I had this epiphany that God had been calling me to help him for a long time, and I'd been saying no. When you win an argument with God, you lose. When you lose an argument with God, you win. And I was like, God called the wrong person, not my monkey, not my circus. But he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And of course, if you don't want to bring people back into your life that you've disconnected from, don't marry a psychiatrist. Let me just put it that way. Just don't do it. So Daniel kept insisting that he's like, I need to see him. We have to scan him. And I'm like, you don't know what you're getting involved in. My family is not like your family. My family is like Jerry Springer material. So he kept insisting. He finally wins. My dad didn't have Alzheimer's disease. So we end up, now fast forward, we have this opportunity, because he didn't have Alzheimer's disease. He ends up being in my life, sort of reluctantly, hence the reluctant healer. But I had this opportunity to heal our relationship. 5 years later, he's dying, but not anything brain related. He had leukemia, and he dies in my arms with me praying for him. And I realized that God had called me to do that. Yeah, the help was for my dad, but the healing was for me. God knew I needed to heal. And so if I had walked away from that opportunity, it would have been me that suffered. So sometimes we're called to help people so that we can heal ourselves. And I realized that it's happened over and over in my life. And I'll probably continue to argue with God, but it's just such an important lesson that I learned.
I think that's a perfect segue to a comment here from Forever and For Always. I can't think of any childhood traumas. However, I have a hard time trusting and forgiving people. And that goes to my point of, it doesn't have to be the twists and turns that you experienced. What advice do you have for people that haven't got there yet, that don't really know how to find forgiveness, that still live in their anger, still live in their frustration? I would imagine that's where some of your faith comes in. That's in the title. I hear that that's a pretty large part of your life.
It is. And probably like a lot of people, faith was hard for me. There was a time where I left that journey because I thought, I got so depressed, and at 23, I got cancer, and I got so depressed that I wanted to die. And I thought, if there's a God, he doesn't love me. So why should I love him? And if God's like my dad, why should I love him anyways? And so I walked away from that path, but I realized how desperate and lonely I was. It wasn't hurting anybody but me. And so eventually I came back, and there was this revelation that I had. My dad's not God. People aren't God. People are people. They're human. And so I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say that it happened overnight. It didn't. I mean, I did years of intentional work to make that happen, to let go of that anger. And it was just so worth it, because I just am in such a different place now. And I stepped back, and every time it got difficult, I asked myself, what kind of a person do I want to be at the end of my life? How do I want to be remembered? What kind of a mother do I want to be? Do I want my child to go through the same kind of life I had? Because she will if I don't do this. And so that's really what motivated me. Was I was so determined to be a better wife, a better mother, a better person at the end of my life. It wasn't because I was just so strong and such a great person. It's because I just kept asking myself, what kind of person, what kind of mother do you want to be? Because you're not that person right now. And so
Anyone who would follow you on Instagram, though, Tana, would see this beautiful woman, successful, married to this successful doctor, achieving so much. And I know you've even heard from people who have prayed that they can have the strength that you have. They're surprised, I know, to read this book, to learn all that you've gone through. I know you're only scratching the surface, which is shocking for many of us as we're just hearing it. But it's almost like it doesn't have a face. Trauma doesn't have a look.
It doesn't.
And anyone, even you, can experience it. How do you try and communicate that to people?
So yeah, that's interesting. So I, for a long time, actually felt guilty because when I got cancer, I was told my cancer wasn't terminal. It just kept coming back. It kept recurring. And I went into this very, very deep depression. And then I had this guilt because I was overwhelmed with guilt. Besides being so depressed that I would pray that I would die, I just kept praying that a truck would hit me or end it because it was just, I was wasting oxygen on the planet. You know, I realized that I felt so much guilt. I'm like, I can't even get cancer right. I can't get cancer in a way that makes sense because I felt bad that I felt bad. I felt bad for being depressed because other people had it worse. And so if I could tell people anything, it's like, have some grace with yourself. You know, just be merciful with yourself. We all experience life very differently. I mean, it's so complicated. At Amen Clinics, we look at what people are going through 4 lenses: biological, which is your biology, your hormones, you know, your brain health, what's going on inside of your body, your psychology, how are you thinking, what's happening with your thought process. Your thoughts lie, they lie a lot. So how much discipline do you have around that? Your social circle, which really matters. Who are you hanging out with? Who are you spending time with? Because people are contagious. And the spiritual people live 11 years longer. So if one of those tires goes flat, that car might drive for a while, but it's not going to drive well. But if more than one goes flat, that car is eventually going to crash. And so, you know, my car flipped. And it's not even that I was like ready to take this on. It's that I didn't really have a choice. I was the queen of facades. I had this great facade on, you know, do the hair, do the makeup, don't let anybody see you sweat, like just make sure nobody sees it. But then I realized just how lonely that is. It doesn't help anybody. So yeah, if you look at my Instagram, I'm actually not that great at taking Instagram photos like everybody else. But yeah, we all have this life we present. But the truth is there's a lot behind that. And I am pretty honest about it. I mean, in the book, I'm very honest. In our podcast, I'm pretty honest about the struggles. And I really think that pain shared is pain divided.
Yeah, I think even in the title, the relentless courage, this is not something, as you described, that one day you woke up and you decided to do this. This sounds like a lifelong journey that only now you've gotten to a place that you can either share it, embrace it, accept it. It takes that persistence. What does that persistence look like? What were all of those years like before you got to this point?
A train wreck, actually. So, just being honest, there was a point where it was just a train wreck. I'm like, this is not life in oncoming traffic. I mean, this is not life in the fast lane. This is life in oncoming traffic. It was bad. But you know, it's just worth the fight. And it's why I chose the metaphor of a warrior. I chose that metaphor of a warrior for that reason. I practice martial arts. I love it. I've been practicing for a very long time. But one of the reasons I went on that journey was because I thought when I was at my weakest, when I was really depressed, I thought, what is the opposite of me right now? I mean, I consciously picked that up and I was like, what is the opposite of me? Who does this well, right? It's a warrior. Warriors are always prepared. They train all the time. They don't show up on fight day and just expect to win. They train every day. They're aware, they're prepared. And that's what I started thinking like that. I started thinking if I could just grasp that mindset, you know, I would do so much better than this person who felt broken and weak. So even when I was the most broken, I just tried to really wrap my brain around, this is how I'm going to think of my life every day.
How much has your marriage influenced that? You know, I opened up this Instagram live explaining how I met Dr. Amen at the Amen Clinic. I had my brain scanned. It was just for a segment. We were going to do a 2-minute piece. I was so taken by the knowledge and the information that I felt so many people needed to know. We did an entire brain week. And it was a huge success. I've continued to really find a friendship in Dr. Amen and your family. You are just incredible people. How much of that plays a part in how you've been able to enter this new chapter?
So I should start by saying I was not a patient at Amen Clinics. It's very important that I clarify. Although my husband tells people that I was an ongoing project, but you know, so yeah, it played a big role. My husband, if you have ever met him or seen him, even if you see him on his Instagram live, or if you know, see his Facebook chats or whatever it is, he really is that person. I mean, that he just is who he appears to be. I actually almost canceled my first date with him when I found out he's a psychiatrist. I wanted zero to do with a psychiatrist. I'm like, I am not going to date someone who's going to psychoanalyze me. I'm not doing this. but it was a love story. It was the first time in my life I felt 100% safe to share the worst things about me. And he didn't think they were that bad. I'm like, and I tried to do him a favor. I'm like, look, I'm doing you a favor. Go away. You don't want part of this. I promise you, right? This is not something, I kept telling him that. He's like, let me decide that. And so just over time, I felt so safe. And he kept introducing me to different vehicles, if you will. So he introduced me to Byron Katie, which was just a huge treat. She has a process that she calls the work. It's 4 questions that really turn your life inside out. And then his first gift to me was 10 sessions of EMDR. I'm like, okay, who gives, only a psychiatrist gives their first gift is therapy, right? But I felt so safe with him. And it was in that safety that I realized that the things that I thought were really ugly, the things that I thought I needed to hide from the world. I'm going to get emotional. He just loved me more because of them, and it is about, fit matters. And I don't know that you have to have that in your life in order to heal. I don't think that's true. But I'm not going to say it hurt.
Yeah, it is really, when you say just a love story, that's a really simple but beautiful way of describing it. I have this Instagram live. I call it All Good Things because my whole point of this is to inspire, to educate, to leave people fuller. It's not to talk about bad things, but in this case, it's talking about the bad things because of what it led to. Right. It's about giving people the hope. And that's where I really want you to talk a little bit about where you get to in this book of how you found hope, how you can share it with other people, because I think a lot of people need it right now.
So I finally got to this place of doing enough healing on my own. And I thought, okay, I'm doing so much better. It wasn't until I was challenged that, I think that that's true a lot of times in life. You get challenged, and that's when you realize what you're really made of. It's like, oh, I train, I work out, that's all good. But then when you're challenged with something physically, you end up in the hospital or you get hurt. That's when you really realize how strong you really are, right? So that's what kind of happened with me. I did a ton of work. I was like, I'm doing good. And then all of a sudden, God started putting all these challenges in front of me. And he was like, no, this is why I wanted you to get well, because I have work for you to do. And at that point, I was like, no, I'm not ready to do this. Like, I just got well. That's enough. And it was like, God was going, no, it's not. Like, there's work for you to do. I have a purpose for you. And so I couldn't have known back then that the pain that I felt, the almost wanting to die, like it's a depression is a pain. Like anybody who hasn't experienced it, we throw that word around so easily, but the truth is it's brutal. It's just brutal. You want to just get out of your skin. You can't. You can't get away from it. And I couldn't have known that lack of hope, that just sheer bottom of the pit, if you will, was going to be the platform for me later of turning pain into purpose. It's what I use now to help people. It's the fuel. And so if there's anybody really suffering in this moment, that's one thing I would really tell you. Please don't give up. Because that pain to purpose is some of the most joy. That's like the biggest joy you will find in life, when you can finally make that turn and you can share it with someone else. And it's not just about you, So one of the things I teach my daughter is when things are not going well, the last 6 months have been pretty wonky for kids. And so we've got 3 teenagers in the house. We ended up adopting our 2 nieces, bringing them into our home right before quarantine. And, when they start to go off track, it's like, why is the world a better place? Because you breathe. Because that takes it from poor me to I have a responsibility. Why is the world better? Because I'm in it. Like, what are you doing to make it better? Nobody told you life was going to be fair, right? Fair is a place with bad food and farm animals. But what are you doing to make this world a better place? And so it was worth that journey because God had those things in store for me. Yes, I did the work on myself. And that's when it really got hard. So at that point, that's when the challenges were put in front of me. But that was the biggest payoff. And that's the thing that you can't really explain to anybody. It's like, I always think of it, I equate it to working out. You don't get stronger, you don't get in better shape by not lifting heavier weight. You got to lift heavy weight, right? In order to really strengthen that muscle. And that's kind of what those situations were like. I think of them as training.
I think we are all working as parents to try and teach our children that right now, especially about how disappointment, how pain all of that. We've all experienced it. No one by our age is free of failure, perceived failure, or disappointment. I think that lesson is so valuable, but I also think parents are struggling right now so much
Yeah.
in their own circumstances. And there may be a lot of people out there that are questioning their faith, that
Yeah.
may be thinking, how can there be a God when I've lost my job? I've lost my family. I've lost so much. And that's where hope comes in. And that's where I would be curious to say, what about those people who are questioning their faith?
You know, faith is a tricky thing. It's a personal journey, but I will say I've been there. I mean, I literally within 2 months, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had the world by the tail. Like life was going the direction I wanted it to go. Finally, I was in my 20s and I finally felt like everything was turning around from my childhood. And then bam, my mom had brain surgery. I had cancer. I had to quit my job. I had to drop out of school. I ended up filing for bankruptcy and I went into this wicked depression. So I've been to the point of losing it all. And that's when I just went, why am I here? I mean, I'm just wasting oxygen. So I've been to that place and I blamed God. I questioned God. I fought with God. For me, I realized that it wasn't God that walked away from me. I walked away from God. I'm not one of those people who believes that God causes bad things to happen. I believe that they can be used for good. I believe there's a lot of reasons that bad things happen. It's just above my pay grade to really understand all of it. I mean, I'm a nurse. I work in the hospital where, children die, babies die.
Sense.
It doesn't make sense. And it's just above my pay grade. So, but I do believe that we can take the worst things that happen in humanity and we can use them for good. We are human beings. I mean, we're at the top of the food chain. We can do this, but we have to be willing to do it. You got to put the work in. So you got to take responsibility. Responsibility is my favorite word on the planet.
All of those lessons, all of those messages of hope are in your new book, which I know isn't out until January 5th, but it is available for pre-order. Can you let people know not only where they can find that, but what also, I know that you're offering some gifts to people if they do pre-order. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've got about over $400 worth of gifts. If you go to relentlesscourage.com, you can pre-order it. We've got the gifts. We also have an event coming up completely free. You can go to my website, tanaamen.com, and you'll see the event. You can sign up for that. My husband will be speaking. I am hosting it. JJ Virgin will be there. We've got Pastor Derwin Gray, Pastor Miles McPherson. We just have some amazing guests that are going to be with us. It's December 12th, Saturday. But if you order relentlesscourage.com, you get $400 worth of gifts. I'm also going to enter people who sign up for the event. I'm going to enter them into a raffle to win an evaluation of AMEN clinics.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I see someone chiming in, first saying awesome speakers, oh my goodness, but also saying waiting for it to release in India. Worldwide, everyone is thrilled to learn so much more about you, the difficulties that you've had, but also the incredible growth and the hope that it can give to so many of us. What an honor to talk to you, Tana, and to get some insight into what you've been through. I think that it would be so valuable for people out there.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It's such a privilege.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.